Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back on SR 1029 and the Coast Sports Network. So glad everybody could be with me this evening. It's week 14 around the National Football League, and crazy times around the league. 6 teams are on a bye, but there's a lot of good games to talk about, news and notes, and I had to bring one of my, I'll call him a veteran. He told me he was done, he was retired. Well, not until I'm done with him. But very glad to have Bob Groats on this evening with Kevin and myself. And Bob has been around the Philadelphia sports scene for a long time. I won't say a number of years. I'll
Yeah.
let him do that. And in particular, we'll talk about the Eagles. Guys, I wanted to get your first thing out the bat. There was somebody that put $3.1 million on the money line for the Eagles against the Carolina Panthers. Now, luckily, they won, and they won about $442,000 or so. But do you think that guy's crazy, Bob? I mean, what are you thinking about that?
Yeah. But a couple of weeks ago, who did when they played Dallas? I would have put everything on that, Lloyd and Kevin. I would have taken the title from my car and put it on that one. I mean, and they crushed them. You knew Dallas was going to lose that one big, but yeah, it's getting crazy. And that gambling is like I remember. I have been reporting on the Eagles since since '92, right after Jerome Brown died. I covered the Eagles for all but 1 year in that time. And I remember walking in that locker room door walking in the locker room, and on the door was a big sign: "No gambling. Do not
Yeah,
associate
I
with
remember that.
gambling."
Yep.
It was a huge sign, and now there's no sign of anything like that. And I'll tell you, year to year, you find out about guys suspended many games or indefinitely for gambling violations. That's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we have no clue how deep the issues are right now. And man, I kind of I have a problem with where that's heading. But I'm old school, so I don't like the big gambling thing. I had a nephew who came up to me and he said, "Uncle Bob, who's going to win the third quarter? Who do you think's going to win the third quarter?" And I was like, "This is my nephew." It's like, and the
He
kids are.
shouldn't be gambling, man.
I know a lot of these kids. They're talking about it. And I don't
Kevin
think
and I have had my
yeah,
son on. He's 19, and
man.
trust me, he's in college, and I won't. There's a lot of people doing that stuff.
Yeah, you want to take them off you want to take them off as a beneficiary, when you die or something, because they might have, they
Yeah.
may have some debt. But
Uh,
thank God he's not he's not doing it. His parents are aware of it. But
there you
you know,
go. Go ahead, Kevin. What do you got for
Well,
Bob?
just a tip on jump on that real quick. First of all, you bet $3.1 million. I don't think it's his last $3.1 million he has. So he had it to lose, but to win 440K, am I doing it? Absolutely not. The juice
yeah,
isn't worth the squeeze on that one. But kudos to him. There's a little bit of all of us that kind of maybe hoped he might have lost that one. Not gonna lie. But also going back to the kids gambling and everything else, it's becoming an epidemic now. The rise in young kids, teenage kids. I know kids right now that sit there and they have fake IDs to gamble. It used to
yeah,
be
that
in
may,
bars,
Wow.
now it's to gamble. It's crazy out there.
yeah, with those cell phones and everything. I mean, they could do everything instantly. They can lie about an identity. I don't know what the test is, to get on one of those gambling to get. I mean, you could say it was your birthday every day with a different website, and they give you free money. And kids are smart enough to recognize that. That is a problem though, and it does make you think. I mean, you gotta. I don't know. I'm glad I don't have a kid that is involved in that. I don't know what I would say.
Yeah, and Bob, speaking of close games and covers or not covers and all this stuff, the Kansas City Chiefs, you and I covered
Uh,
Andy Reid all that long time. They
yeah.
win again last night, 1917. And it's funny you say that because I'm on the phone with my buddy. He goes, I bet my mortgage he's making his kick. Well, as soon as he says that, it bounces off the upright. And I was like, see? I was like, you just never know. So,
Yeah.
Kansas City, what are we thinking in terms of them? Can they keep this up? They keep winning by one score every week.
Yeah. As long as they have Patrick Mahomes, he's, I used to hate him because you knew that whoever was playing him had a great chance to lose. That guy is just so innovative. He's a great guy too. but he's so creative, and so many people have copied what he does. To me, him and Josh Allen are the best in the league. Now I know there's some other people. Like last night, we saw the guy from L.A., Matt Stafford. He looked great too. I mean, just the arm talent and all that. But for my money, I mean, any conversation about the top quarterbacks, and I don't even care about the stats. Any conversation about ranking those top quarterbacks, Mahomes is at the top of my list.
Sure.
So yeah, I think they definitely have a shot. I think the Eagles got a shot to get there too. The NFC, I mean, there's no formidable team there. They're all beatable. Detroit's pretty good. The Eagles are pretty good, and you got to tell me, I don't think Minnesota could beat either of them in the playoffs. So I think we could see another Eagles Andy Reid game
Wow. Well,
in New Orleans this time. Yeah,
Oh, it'd be interesting.
it
Go
would.
ahead. Go ahead, Kevin. What you got?
Well, Bob, the one thing I've been saying the last couple of weeks is the Kansas City Chiefs must have like 5 or 6 Houdini wins now. I mean, they just win at the end. Losses, they're Teflon. Losses don't stick to them. They shake them one way or another. And we say before, it's like, was it the Jordan rules they're getting calls? Is it, luck? Is it blocked field goals? Whatever have you. They win. And that's bottom line. And then Patrick Mahomes, he has the championships now. He doesn't care about stats. He was never that guy to begin with. But he's just about wins. And I mean, wouldn't you want him as your quarterback? I mean, as much as it starts with the animosity towards him and the winning, and you start to loathe the same team winning over and over again, you got to tip your hat, man. That guy he's a player.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting because I think Josh Allen is a great talent too, but I'd take Patrick Mahomes. I mean, in the really big games, Josh Allen beats him in the regular season all the time. In the playoffs, and it's not always Josh Allen's fault, but in the playoffs for a bigger game, you know who's going to win that. But I really, I've heard a lot of stuff this year too about. And it does make me think about the officials and the Chiefs. And I don't think the Chiefs have anything to do with the calls or anything. Are they getting some calls? That could be the case. And I've seen those memes too with the referee wearing a Chiefs uniform, and like
Yes.
yeah, incomplete pass, but since it's the Chiefs, we're going to call a penalty and give them another down, and if the pass isn't incomplete, like the explanation by the referee. And it's like sometimes you wonder about that stuff. But and then we go back. Then I go back to the gambling a little bit. And when I hear people say it's fixed, like pro sports, it's like I'm not in a position to argue anymore. I mean, I don't know, but some of the stuff is really fishy, man. It's like, but I don't know. I mean, who does know, and how, and if anyone did know, how do they prove it? So there's just so many variables. But I really like the job that Mahomes has done in his career. And you know what? I remember I said I didn't want to talk about any election stuff here, Lloyd and Kevin. But I got to say this about Patrick Mahomes, and I really appreciated him for this. When celebrities were coming out and endorsing this candidate, that candidate, he just said, I don't think that's my job to do that, to tell people what they should do to vote. And I just really appreciated that, and I think that was something that needed to be said. And what a stand-up guy. So he's like a good guy. And you know who he reminds me of a little bit? Just that stand-up guy. Because I've heard from reporters in Kansas City too that he likes to do as many interviews as he can, or he make himself available to reporters at his locker as much as he can. He does the big interviews, at the podium. But he reminds me of Michael Vick. The Eagles tried to get Michael Vick to do his interviews in the auditorium, and he did. After when he first got to the Eagles, he did them there. But after a while, he told him no. He wanted to do them at the locker, which I thought was great. I mean, he's just a regular guy, and you could approach him coming off the field, walking outside the complex. And that's what Mahomes really reminds me of him, just as a regular guy who really loves to play, and just as he likes people too.
Yeah. And we're talking with Bob Groats here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. Kevin, I'll get your take on this first, and then Bob can chime in. There's been so much talk, Kevin, about Saquon Barkley And he just broke the Eagles' single season rushing record of Shady McCoy of 1607. And everybody's talking about 2105. Should Saquon even think about going for Dickerson's record? And could there be some kind of repercussions? Kevin, go first.
There'll definitely be some repercussions one way or another. And I'm guessing at the end of the day, Nick Sirianni will get blamed for it one way or the other. It's going to be he didn't play him or he did play him. Either way, Nick can't win in this situation. He needs to hope that Saquon busts out like 400 yards in the next 2 games. Because if not, it's good, the onus will fall on him at this point. I mean, it's tough. I've been hearing the talk like you guys have, and it's like, all right, say he goes in the last game of the season, the Eagles don't need the win. Say he needs 75 yards. Do you put him in there? And they were saying, like, I even heard Jaworski on the air talking about it. It's like that offensive line wants him to get that record. They don't get the accolades that the big name guys get. So to put their name on the fact they had that running back break the record would be huge for them. I heard other people say, oh, it's 17 games. I'm a lifelong Eric Dickerson fan. He did it in 16. OJ did it in 14. So there's always going to be that asterisk to it. At the end of the day, should he do it? It depends on the yards. It really does.
Yeah, I'd like to see him get it. Personally, yeah, I'd love to see him get it. And I don't make those decisions. There's always the chance of injury, so I wouldn't want to even have to make that decision. But my thinking would be you're here, you got a shot. It's like that perfect season that the Patriots were looking at. You know, if you're at that juncture, maybe you got to take a shot. It's a little different. I mean, it's an individual thing. We all know that they're gonna, you know, and maybe they're fighting for a bye still. Who knows? You know, maybe there's maybe that'll help out. But I kind of would take a shot at it though. Although I'm not the coach, and like Kevin said, I mean, no matter what Nick does, you know, if he doesn't get the record, if he gets hurt or whatever it is, Nick, there's going to be no right decision for him.
Yeah. And Bob, I wanted to talk with you in terms of you covered Eagles so many years. You covered, I think, 3 Super Bowl teams for the Philadelphia Eagles. So 04, 17, 20, 22. Could you kind of compare those teams? I know the 17 team won it all, but just talk about covering those Super Bowls and those 3 teams.
Yeah, the 17 team, the 2017 team was just full of veterans, and that was like you know, in terms of like media friendly, man, those guys had great stories. You know, had like Chris Long could throw in his expertise about winning the Super Bowls with the Patriots. Blunt, you know, the running back. I mean, it was like that was really cool. And Nick Foles, you know, just coming out of nowhere. I still can't, you know, I still can't believe that happened. Yeah, right. I mean, it just, yeah. I mean, especially the way he looked down the home stretch in the regular season. But they, you know, they wanted him to play a vanilla type of offense. But that was kind of the coolest team. The 2004 team with Donovan, that was a very talented team, and they should have won that Super Bowl. I really think that the Patriots, the cheating, I think that was a factor. Andy Reid didn't make a big deal, but I really think it was because, you know, the Eagles, the Patriots had a beat me sign on their backs, you know, and the Eagles, they just couldn't get there. And I guess Donovan got too amped up in that fourth quarter. I'll say this for Donovan. I mean, he in that extreme heat, he always would get ill, you know. He'd hyperventilate. It just happened. It happened in college. It happened a couple of times in the NFL. And that night, I remember being in that press box, and it was air conditioned. I mean, it was really humid. So I couldn't imagine what it'd be like on the field, and that was in Jacksonville. So, but you know, and that's a shame for Donovan because he had a great career, and he just got tired of rehabbing all the knee injuries and that, you know. And then in Arizona, that was a fun time too. You know, the Eagles team there, I really, you know, I still think if they had if Vic Fangio had been the defensive coordinator for the Eagles that year, and he was a consultant for them, but if he had been the defensive coordinator, I think they would have won that Super Bowl, and Hurts would have been the MVP. And I just don't. I just think Jonathan Gannon, you know, as good of a season as he had, and really the playoffs, you know, who did they beat? The 49ers in the NFC title game without a quarterback. So, you know, that was like they were fortunate there. But, you know, if Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator now, had been the coordinator in that, they'd have 2 Super Bowls. I'm convinced.
Yeah, we're talking with Bob Groats here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game. Uh, Kevin, I always had a soft spot for Buddy Ryan as my Eagles coach, and everybody always said, "Oh, he never won nothing." So, Kevin, talk about who was your favorite Eagles coach, and then Bob will have you chime in since you covered Reed and the infamous Chip Kelly and Sirianni. But go ahead, Kevin.
I mean, I grew up around the same time you did, Lloyd. I'm not going to say Marion Campbell. I'm not going to jump over to Rich Kotite at that point either. Since you took Buddy Ryan, that's the one I grew up watching. I'll tell you what, when the Eagles started winning with Ray Rhodes, we were so happy for Rich Kotite to be gone. And it was one of those things with Ray Rhodes. It was like, all right, it was one of those acts, it wore out real quick. But it was, breaking into your house or stealing from you and the speeches and everything else. And it was like, you felt a fire under that team, and it was one of those you didn't have for a long time. So since you took Buddy, I'll jump for the first 2-3 years of Ray Rhodes.
All right, there you go. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Bob.
that's pretty good. It's tough. Those were really entertaining years. I guess for a head coach, I guess I probably would have to go with Andy. Although, he could be really good, and when that stuff happened with his family and stuff, and he was protecting his family, is particularly after the overdose of his son at training camp. After that, I mean, it was really difficult to be around him, and he was trying to shield his family and everything, and he went from being really accessible to inaccessible. So, and that last year of Andy was just brutal, man. It was just
Yeah, I
it
remember
doesn't
that
get any
season.
worse than that. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's really incredible too. I mean, I think back on this, Kevin and Lloyd, and I think, wow, what an honor to be able to cover. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. We know that, and what an honor that was, and not even realizing it at the time, and and also the situation that he took over in Kansas City. Do you remember how bad that was? Remember the guy, the player, shot his wife, or no,
yeah.
not his wife, but the mother of his child. He shot her, and then he
At
went back and shot himself in front of Romeo Cornell.
complex.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, who would have stepped into that job? I mean, and Andy did. Andy took over it right after that. I mean, just to get through that, I thought that was like, that's a job a coach would, no puns intended, or no nothing bad. That would have been the place that a coach would go to die, like a career. But
yeah,
wow, what a job he did, man.
yeah.
And like I said, I mean, I think they get back there, and you know what? Not just the Birds, whoever they play, I think they're going to win. They're third in a row.
Okay, yeah. And Bob's from
Spoiler
that
alert.
Kansas City there. Yeah. It's interesting because early in the season, Kevin and I did our picks, and I said, oh, yeah, they'd probably be the first to three-peat, and it'd be against Detroit. Now, we'll see if that all shakes out. And the crazy thing is, the only team to beat Detroit and the Eagles is Tampa Bay. So, you know, could Tampa jump up there? I know the Eagles probably don't want to see them again, but that's something for another day. So we're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Games, Coast Sports Network. Bob, wanted to get your take before we get you out of here on the MVP race. Everybody's saying Saquon has a chance. I don't know if you have a vote or not. I had a vote
No, yeah,
through the
no,
Pro Football Writers Association. We had a separate
right.
award, and I voted for that before. But they just don't give it to anybody but quarterbacks. So do you think Saquon has a chance, and where do you think he stands in terms of Josh
Yeah,
Allen?
he'd have to get real close to that record, almost break it, and the voting's going to be concluded before then. Um, yeah, but I think that quarterback's going to get it again. I think it's going to be Josh Allen too, and they stumbled in the other night and last night in Los Angeles, but again, it wasn't because of him, but still, maybe that I don't know, maybe Saquon still got his shot, but I mean, this Eagles team is not 10-2 without him, though. I mean, I think they're like a 500 team without him. So, as good as the defense has been, I think his ability to run the ball, particularly in the second half, the fourth quarter. I mean, his fourth quarter speed is just off the charts for any Eagles running back I've been around. So I think he's very deserving. I still think a quarterback is probably. I think a quarterback is going to get it, But and look at Mahomes. He's got the best record and just not the stats. And I don't think maybe he'll finish in the top 5, but I don't think much better than that. So yeah, I mean, I think Saquon is deserving, and I got to say this too. I had no idea that he would be this good. I knew he'd be. I thought he could be productive, but
Yeah.
flirting with 2,000 yards, I had no clue.
Yeah, especially as pass happy as the Eagles have been the last couple of years. So they've established a run. So, Kevin, you want to get one more in with Bob?
I agree with Bob, actually. It's like, I think it's 1A and 1B, no doubt about it. It's a two-horse race. I think Josh Allen will get it. He keeps hanging numbers as well. And the whole thing for Saquon to be a non-quarterback to win it really needs to separate himself. I think he almost needs that record to get the award. That being said, and something we're going to get into a little later, I think the strong Eagles running game now is highlighting the deficiencies of Jalen Hurts as a passer. And we'll tap into that one a little later. But Saquon, without Saquon, I agree with Bob. I mean, they're a 500 team. There's at least 4 games they don't win without Saquon there.
Yeah, I'm
Bob,
with you. I'm with Kevin too about that, hiding the deficiencies of the passing game. There's guys that are open, like on a lot of plays, but there's also receivers that are kind of freelance, and then you see like 2 receivers in the same area. I don't know what's going on exactly, but that pass game it's like it's bad. It's below average. So,
yeah,
all right, great being on, you guys.
Oh yeah, I appreciate you coming on,
All right.
we'll get you on later on. Now's to retire. You're not fully retired. I know you're doing something.
Oh yeah,
I
no,
know
I'm done. Yeah, I am
Okay.
done. Yeah,
Well, you
Good for you,
enjoy your
Bob.
days,
yeah.
and enjoy it, man. I'll
I'm like that
hope to
guy.
get there one day.
I'm like the guy on Office Space. The character.
You're in
I'm like
Stapler.
I'm doing nothing. Yeah, I love doing
That's
nothing.
awesome.
All right, see you guys.
Take care,
All
Bob.
right,
Be
all
good.
right, man.
All right.
Talk to you. The great Bob Groats. We appreciate him coming on. 43-year veteran, sports writer here in the Philadelphia area from Delco Times and a couple other publications. And he and I used to see each other in the press box, in the locker room, and practices. But he's really plugged in on the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, my days of being a beat guy were past with with the Andy Reid era and all that, but he stuck around with the team a long time. I almost wanted to ask him about Chip Kelly. I wanted to slip that one in, but
Yeah, none of us mentioned him. Yeah.
I didn't think that was going to turn out good. But we did mention Ray Rhodes, and the Eagles have had an eclectic group of coaches ever since during our time following the team, and it was so much fun listening to Bob talk about the accessibility and I remember that last season of Andy Reid, unfortunately, with his son dying, and the team was just in total disarray. I mean, I remember when they called a presser and we're all in overcare, and they say, we're naming Juan Castillo as our defensive coordinator. And I was like, oh my God, this thing's off the rails. So, but it was so much fun listening to Bob. We'll have to get him on again. He and I bonded over, I was at a wrestling tournament. I bumped into him. So, but it was fun talking to him. So,
Just to throw out real quick, too, Bob. Oh, man, that's the first time I talked to Bob in forever and a day. He was on the Sports Chatter show many times back in the day. So when you said he was going to be on, I was like, oh, all right, Bob's going to be on. Nice.
Yeah, he I think he was buddies with our old friend Gene Giello, who you and I used to do the show with, and they're Delco guys, so Delaware County, they're big Eagles country there, and Bob was their guy on the ground with the Eagles, and must read. All my friends and family that are over from that area, they would say, I'd always, Bob knows what he's talking about, and I say, well, I know him, so he's one of my guys, and they say, oh, if you know him, you must be doing all right, Lloyd. So great to get him on. We'll get him. Probably as he anticipates, and you and I do, the Eagles making their run, and they have 4 games left. Kevin and I will go over most of the games in a few minutes, but it was great to get Bob on. I wanted to start getting a take about recent news and notes, and then we'll start hitting some of these games here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Kevin, there was a fan during the national anthem Thursday night. He was I guess he was helping with the flag on the field or something. And he got into it with the Packers head coach Matt LaFleur. So, did you see that?
I saw a little bit of it. Yeah.
Do you think security's too lax? I mean, that was like, oh man, that was kind of a little scary there for a second, because that fan wasn't kind of backing down.
Yeah, you have to. Not everyone has a big dom on their team to separate from the coach, so maybe they need to look into that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, security is lacking. If you look at any of these games, and it's on everyone's Twitter and Instagram, the fights that break out in stands and everything else,
Yeah.
you never see the security people. And it's like, then now you're like with the players and the coaches, you rarely see the security people there as well. It's like, where are these people, and what are they getting paid to do?
Yeah, and it's interesting, and maybe we could talk to Bob about the Philly rep, and the fans. And we all know we grew up in that area, and yeah, okay, sometimes it can be a little over the top, but I've seen clips in one stadium, SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. There seems to be fights all the time there, and I'm talking about like, I saw one where and people tape all this stuff now. We talk about kids and the phones, and everybody's got one. Um, you know, a man cold clocking a woman in another jersey, and then a husband getting involved. It was just crazy. It's just like, in the end of the day, I used to always tell everybody, I'm like, all right, it's still a game, or get over it. It's not worth fighting over. Yeah, you can go back and forth. My one buddy I used to go to the games with, he used to always start, yapping at people wearing a Shockey jersey because he hated Jeremy Shockey. But sometimes, like you were saying, it's just a little too crazy, and people need to kind of relax. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. We're going to try to hit all the games, and particularly we'll spot check some of the teams that are going to the playoffs and look at those games in particular. So we'll go back to Thursday night, Kevin. Now this one, the Detroit Lions, everybody's talking about they're the darlings in the NFL, and they're 12-1. They had them number one in all their power rankings. I'm starting to wonder: is Dan Campbell is he going to in the playoffs shoot himself in the foot? Because he was 4 for 5. He went for it on fourth downs. One time was in his own 30-yard line area. They failed. Packers scored right away, and this game got real close. So, talk to me a little bit about this game, and do you think that Campbell needs to relax a little bit because they are a true Super Bowl contender?
Dan Campbell is the Michigan Nick Sirianni. He is their version of Nick Sirianni, who just makes these calls sometimes and you just shake your head. It's in his DNA, though. That's just who he is. He's the guy, and we spoke about it before on the show, he's like he's sitting on a sofa drinking a beer making calls, but the difference is he's actually on the sideline making the calls. And that's why I want to see Detroit and Philadelphia play in the championship game. For sound bites alone, for the media, it'll be fantastic. For the just absurd play call you're going to see from each coach at some point, it's must-see TV.
Yeah, and he's not backing off of it, even though his team is a playoff. And the last one, smartly, he was able to shut the door. Most of the coaches I've covered and been around, they would have kicked that field goal earlier, and there would have been some time o'clock. But he's like, what, fourth down, we're still going for it. I want to kill the clock, and it worked out where Bates hit a 35-yard game winner with no time left on the clock. But you just wonder about the Lions. Can they overcome him? They've had a myriad of injuries, particularly on defense. No Hutchinson, Angeloni, Rodriguez. There was a bunch of their linebackers out, and then there was a couple guys hurt in this game as well. So, do we still think that Detroit is the number one contender in the NFC, or could the Eagles catch them, or possibly the Vikings that we're going to talk about in a minute?
I still think Detroit, as long as they have home field advantage, that's a team to beat. And I think it's going to apply the same if it's Philadelphia, because if you throw Detroit, Minnesota, you throw the dome teams out there, and then they have to go play outside. That's why that one seed is huge in the NFC. It's huge to begin with, but especially in the NFC this year.
Yeah, it is. And looking at the standings, right now Detroit's the number one seed in the NFC. They have Buffalo this week. We'll preview that game. That's a huge game coming up. Then they're at Chicago, at San Francisco, Minnesota. So they have some tough games. The Eagles, another big game we'll preview. The Eagles will host the Steelers. They're at Washington, Dallas, the Giants. So, a little easier on the back end for them. And then the Vikings, Chicago, at Seattle, Green Bay, at Detroit. So they're another one. They're playing 3 potential playoff teams. So Minnesota, I think they may kind of go by the wayside. Yeah. So we'll see in that. But yeah, it was a good win for the Lions, and they're going to have to just, particularly golf. Golf's going to have to he can't have those interception type games. He was pretty efficient in this one, 32 of 41, 283, 3 TDs, and had 1 interception. Now, on the other side of it, the Packers started very slow in this one. Love was 12 of 20, 206, 1 TD. Kind of picked it up in the second half, but first half, man, they weren't doing much anything. They only had 7 points. They were down 17-7 at one point. So, what are we thinking about the Packers?
I think the Packers, I don't think they can get ahead almost at this point of Minnesota and Detroit. I think they're going to be locked into playing on the road, that's for sure. And which is a shame in that division, the fact that they are, 3 games behind Detroit now, I believe?
Yeah,
2 behind Minnesota, something like that. So, I mean, the fact they're going to have to do that, but the thing that works in their favor is they're not a stranger to it. They did it last year. And if you get them in the right frame of mind going to the playoffs, they're the dangerous wild card in the mix. I don't think it's Minnesota. I think it's Green Bay.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because Green Bay is at Seattle this week. It'd be a playoff type preview type of game, and we'll see how they do. But Green Bay really has cleaned up their defense, and Rashawn Gary and Jair Alexander and the rest of those guys are really getting after people. So they're a good team. But as you said, it's just this may be an unprecedented thing in that division. You're going to probably have 3 teams with double-digit wins. I'll have to look up in the history of the NFL if that's happened before. But, both these teams are solid. Good win for the Lions. We'll keep moving on. The next game I wanted to kind of hit on was Minnesota. They're 11-2. The Atlanta Falcons, they're 6-7. Minnesota beats them 42-21. And this game, you saw, I'll say, the brilliance of Sam Darnold. 5 TDs in this one, no interceptions. Some of his throws were underthrows where Addison really helped him. Addison had 133 yards and 3 TDs. Jefferson really came out to play in this one, 7 catches, 132, 2 TDs. So talk a little bit about the Vikings. Are they for real? They still kind of remind me a lot of that team that Bob was talking about earlier, that 2017 team that lost to the Eagles in the NFC Championship game with Case Keenum. I'm just not going to buy into these guys wholeheartedly. So what do we think about the Vikings in this win over the Falcons?
I got a lot of thoughts, Lloyd, about this one. A lot of thoughts. No one really cares about anyone else's fantasy team, but
here it is.
Season. Nothing like playing the guy who has Sam Darnold as a starting quarterback and 5 tutties on you. That was great. That was great to be on the outside of the playoffs looking in now. Fantastic. I was like, Sam Darnold throws 5 touchdowns. You got to be kidding me, man. And of course, how I feel about USC quarterbacks on top of that. So that was like, that's fantastic. That's awesome. Minnesota's, if you look at it, put yourself to the side and just look at it, nobody thought they'd be where they are right now. Nobody. And I'm including people that live in Minnesota are thinking the same thing. They're almost playing with house money at this point. And like we talked about just a moment ago, it's like, do I think they're the biggest threat next to Detroit and Philadelphia? Not really. But they're having a great season, man. You got to give your hat off to them.
Yeah, and Kevin O'Connell has done a great job. He's got to be in the coach's ear talking. As you said, it's been kind of improbable because you just never thought. But I just keep thinking, I'm like, all right, when the playoffs start, the old Sam Darnold that would mess around for the Jets and the Carolina Panthers is going to show up. And nice story, putting up some great stats. But even though they're 11-2, the schedule's been kind of soft a little bit. And I don't think, they're scaring Detroit at all. That Week 17 game in Detroit, that may be interesting for Minnesota. But to finish, they're at Seattle, Green Bay, at Detroit. So I think we're really going to see if Darnold's for real. The defense is kind of pesky, and they have a ton of turnovers that they're creating. They're leading NFL in turnovers. Murphy had 2 interceptions in this one. One was a nice one-handed catch. So it was definitely a great win for the Vikings. I want to talk to you real quick about the other side of this. And somebody that is really trying to get the lackey is Kirk Cousins. I don't know what's going on with him. The last 4 games, 8 interceptions, no touchdowns, all losses, 4 straight losses for the Falcons. I know your guy Pitts. Did he even have a touch in this game? So talk to me a little bit about Cousins, and should they think about Michael Penix Jr. at this point?
For the record, I benched Kyle Pitts, and of course, he did make one reception, so yeah, he still stinks. Kirk Cousins, it's the turnover machine, man. He just can't avoid it. I mean, he threw for over 300 yards. I mean, he's throwing the ball out there, but he's making bad turnovers. And yeah, it's time for Penix Jr. at this point. I mean, I know they paid Kirk Cousins gobs of money here, but you're at a point in your season. Was that 4 in a row, I believe, now they've lost? And it's the fact where it's like they need to win. They need to sustain their playoff position, even though because they have the 2-game tiebreaker. They've beaten Tampa Bay twice. They need a win. They need a jolt on that offense right now. And I'd give Penix Jr. a look just to see what's up.
Yeah, you should think about it. And so next for Atlanta, they play on Monday Night Football. Atlanta is going to the Raiders now. If they can't beat them, it's looking like it may be Desmond Ritter because O'Connell's a little banged up in this one. They can't beat them. They don't deserve to be in a race. And then Chicago's at Minnesota also on Monday night. So we're back to the double dip on Monday next week. So we'll be talking and everybody will be watching those games. I see our buddy Penguin AZ's checking in. He's a Packers fan. He said they are out. Defense still stinks. He said, but he's. I think he's still believing in his team. I do like what LaFleur's doing there. He does have a game plan. I like what Jacobs is doing in terms of running the football for the Packers and that defense playing better. But unfortunately, I just, Detroit kind of has their number. And they had their opportunities in that game. But as we were talking about earlier, they just couldn't capitalize on it. And Watson had that bad fumble in the game. He's just way too inconsistent. But hang in there in terms of your Packers. We're on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coastal Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're going through all the games. This one we'll just touch on kind of quickly. Tampa Bay is now 7-6. They knock off the Raiders, who the Raiders now have the first overall pick in the draft. We'll talk about that. It was 28-13. In this one, a couple things stood out. Baker was okay in this game. Mike Evans, 4 catches. 69 yards. He's trying hard to get his 1,000, but the Bucs are built around their rushing attack. Physical team with Tucker, White. Irving was a little banged up in this one, but do you think the Bucs are the team in the NFC South? I think this is going to be a very weak division champion.
I agree with you. It's going to be a very weak division champion. Yeah, Tampa Bay, that's their division right there. Atlanta hasn't shown me anything the past month that they can sustain a 1-game winning streak, let alone multiple games right there. And Tampa Bay, the matchup with Philadelphia, it keeps coming back to, that's a problem. That is a problem matchup. We've seen it. So, I mean, you've seen worse things. I remember when you saw Seattle get into the playoffs under 500 and they beat New Orleans because they won the division. That was the Marshawn Lynch Skittles game. And it was like every now and then you see this team that they shouldn't be in the playoffs. They pull an upset because they get a home game. So we could be looking at that right there.
Yeah, and the thing is, with the Bucs, they're a little banged up. I talked about Bucky Irvin; he has a back injury. Antoine Winfield has a knee, and then on their offensive line, they had some guys banged up. But they're just stacking W's, and that's what you got to do this time of year. Everybody wants to talk about style points, like we were talking about with the Chiefs and this and that. But the coaches don't care; they're just trying to get their wins and move on, and possibly get that home game. So if they win that division, the Bucs will have a home game, even though they're way behind Minnesota and some of the other teams that could be a wild card. So Atlanta will be at the Raiders, as I said. And then you got Tampa Bay. They'll be at the Chargers. So, and we'll get into that. So, but the Raiders, talking about fantasy football, I know some people had to be upset. Brock Bowers, I think, only had about 50 yards in this game. They were throwing the ball to the other tight end, Mares, so, Any other fantasy football implications in this game? I know my one son, he had Irving, and he was all upset because he got hurt. He was active, but he didn't really play in this game.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. I have Bucky Irving on my team. Oh, he's cleared to play. All right, cool. Let me throw him out there. Oh, he's not going back in the game. Thanks for starting him, guys. Appreciate it. How about you give him the day off? How about you let him heal up? So, yeah, I feel your son's pain on that one.
Yeah, we're getting you talking about all the games of Week 14 here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Kevin Midgette, we had Bob Groats early on, veteran NFL writer, former Eagles beat writer for a number of years. He just retired, but he still has his pulse on his team. So we talked a little bit with him about this game, and I wanted to get Kevin's take on it. Eagles are 11-2. They went at home as a heavy favorite. I think they were a 13-point favorite. They squeaked by Carolina 22-16. Is this foreshadowing? Is this, or is my one buddy that emails me all the time? He said it's just a trap game. They weren't really thinking about Carolina, and they overlooked them, but they woke up just in time. So, how should Eagles fans look at this game?
Well, I mean, I've never seen a line of people trying to jump off the Ben Franklin Bridge after winning 9 games in a row, but you know how the Philadelphia fan base is. I think you have to give some credit to Carolina. This isn't like one game that they just decided to play decent. They've been playing well. They should have beat Kansas City. They had their chance to do it a couple weeks ago. They've been playing better football. Bryce Young, in particular, has been playing better football.
Right.
So, Chuba Hubbard, everyone else. So, I mean, they've been a better team the last month. That being said, as we were talking about when Bob was still on the air with us, you're seeing Jalen Hurts now because he's not throwing the volume of passes now. So you're really getting to analyze and critique the passes he does or does not make. And there are some glaring holes in his quarterback game that we're seeing.
Yeah, and Jalen, they're winning all these games, and that was something I wanted to, and we touched on it with Bob. They're only thrown for about 180 yards per game. He was 14-21, 108 yards per game. He did have 2 TDs, and he had 8 rushes for 61 yards in this game. But you just wonder in the playoffs, if they get behind, that's why I was interested, Kevin, to see if Xavier will get holds on to that football and there's about 40 to 50 seconds left in the game. Can Hurts and Sirianni engineer that game-winning drive? And sometimes, I just wonder with Hurts, is he going to be able to throw the football effectively? Because we haven't seen a quarterback that's truly, mostly a rusher win a Super Bowl. Yeah, Russell Wilson was a scrambler, and Patrick Mahomes scrambles here and there when he has to, but they weren't really run first guys. So, what do you think in terms of Hurts? Does he have the passing ability?
I don't have the confidence in him right now. I mean, going into the season, did I have a lot more confidence in him? Absolutely. But I think we're starting to wander into a slippery slope here. Is it in Jalen's head now? Is it affecting his psyche? Is he checking down because he doesn't want to throw the deep ball, or he doesn't think he can throw the deep ball, or he doesn't want to force it because of all the turnovers that he had earlier in the season? So this is what you have to see where his mind is going in forward into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I was going to ask Bob about this. A.J. Brown, they interview him after the game, and they say, "What's wrong with and he's the offense?" He's like the passing game. And you literally could tell he was pointing a finger at Jalen Hurts that he's not getting him the ball. And then, of course, everybody, I was watching some of the ESPN shows and all that this morning. They're showing the lapses in coverage by Carolina where Brown was open and Hurts chose the safer pass, as you were just alluding to. Is this going to be a problem in the locker room? Bob and I both covered the whole TO mess. And what are you thinking in terms of A.J. Brown? Is this going to be a problem, or should he just be quiet and say, you know what, a win's a win?
I think A.J. Brown is very upset because he was on my fantasy team too, and he didn't get the ball. So, yeah, he's actually sticking up for me on that one right there. But it's true. It's like you're making sure, Dotson gets his targets and everything else, his couple of targets. You just got to force it up to somebody. When you have someone like A.J. Brown who could go get the 50-50 balls and everything else, give him an opportunity to go get the ball, man. You're sitting there, and it's like he's just running routes. He's doing wind sprints, and he's running back. You have a wide receiver like A.J. Brown. Get him the ball.
Yes, and you got to keep him happy. And as we were talking about with Bob earlier, this is a run-first team. The Eagles are running football more than probably any team out there. They run it even more than Baltimore at this point, And Saquon is the engine that has this team going, but as I think they move up in the ladder into the playoffs, teams are going to start loading the box, and they're going to say, okay, Hurts, you're going to have to beat us with your arm. And not having Goddard, that's going to be a big thing. He's on IR right now with a knee injury, and they're not sure when he's going to come back. Calcaterra really has stepped up touchdown yesterday. But they're going to have to – and this was something I was worried about. They're going to have to feed all the mouths on this team. You know what I mean? And Saquon, he had 20 rushes for 124. I know we talked about it earlier in the show, just about the impact of him on the Eagles and He breaks Shady McCoy's single season rushing record for the Philadelphia Eagles, which is great. And he's definitely in the MVP race. Just talk about Saquon's impact, and for anybody that joined us, I still think forget about the single season rushing record. I looked at all the guys in the past, even Eric Dickerson, they never really won a title, other than Terrell Davis, the guy that got that 2000 and all that. Most of those guys did not win a championship.
Yeah, you have your Chris Johnsons. Jamal Lewis with Baltimore had a nice little run there. It's history. I mean, it's been, when did Dickerson break that record? Was it 84, 85? 84. So you're looking at 60, you're looking at 40 years. So, I mean, that's a long time for a record to stand in sports. So if you got that shot, like I said, if you're 75 yards or in, bang it out, feed him the ball, like get him out of the game before halftime, no doubt. If it's like 120, 130, you've got your spot locked up. First of all, Nick Sirianni is going to leave it up to Saquon. And Saquon's going to have to be the grown-up in the room saying, no, I should sit this one out. Because Nick's not going to make that call, which he probably should. Like I said earlier, it's like Nick is going to be wrong no matter what he decides to do. That's exactly what it's going to come down to. Whatever he decides to do, everyone's going to go the opposite way if something goes wrong.
Yeah, and it's just going to be interesting to see how they play this out. And I looked at the Eagles' all-time single-season list, and the one guy that jumped out was Wilbert Montgomery. When we were youngsters, he carried that team to their first Super Bowl in New Orleans, 1980. But he was kind of used up after that season. He had about one or two more seasons left in him, and Saquon is 27, and if the Eagles make a far run into the playoffs, you're talking about maybe 400 touches in the season. That's a lot. You see what happened to Christian McCaffrey this year after all the touches he had for the Niners. So something to think about. But obviously, as you said, Nick is damned if you do, damned if you don't. But it's something fun to watch. And Saquon, it's going to be interesting to see how many MVP votes he gets. I still think he's going to be the Offensive Player of the Year, which is a very good award, the non-quarterback award, quote unquote. Before we get off this Eagles game, Kevin, I want to talk to you a little bit about the defense. Everybody's saying, they're number one across the board, etc. They had a tough time against Carolina. And Adam Thielen had 9 catches, 102 yards. I'm sure a lot of people picked him up on a waiver wire. I don't know if you did. And then Legette obviously bailed out the Eagles. But talking about the Eagles defense, they only had 1 sack in this game. Is this just an aberration or something Eagles fans should kind of be worried about?
I would always be concerned when you see something out of the ordinary like that, just a little bit, because it just takes that one team to set the blueprint on how to attack somebody. And if Carolina sets a blueprint on offense, how to attack the Philadelphia Eagles defense, that's something that's going to get copycatted and variations of it are going to come out. And the same things you've seen before happen to offenses, how to throw off an offense. All of a sudden one team does it and it's like, boom, somebody figured it out. Now we're all going to do it. So, I mean, there's always the following week is always the interesting one to watch. It's like, all right, can we adapt and move forward?
Yeah, and we're talking about the big game next week. Pittsburgh is at Philadelphia. It's kind of a prove-it game, so we'll preview that one. Dallas is at Carolina. I think Dallas is currently up on Cincinnati. If they beat Cincinnati tonight, Dallas is going to – I know you're like, oh, boy. But they would get to 6 and 7. They'd be back and kind of in the race. And I actually like it. Good. Get them in a race, and it'll be fun to see if they can actually do it. So we'll wrap a bow on the Eagles have their 9th straight win. And a win's a win. Keep going. And as we said when we first opened the show, somebody won a lot of money on the money line. But, when you're betting $3 million, as you said, he could probably lose it. There's probably some billionaire somewhere. We're in Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9, the game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're working our way through Week 14. And we are going to preview Week 15 in a few minutes. The Pittsburgh Steelers, 9-3. 10-3 now. They beat the Cleveland Browns, who are 3-10 now, 27-14. I think this was like the 21st straight win over Cleveland in Pittsburgh. So they seem to have their number in their stadium. Good Jameis was there for a little bit. But bad Jameis also was there. He had 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So I just think that's the way it's going to be for them. But the Steelers are really a physical team. Russell Wilson only threw it 26 times. He had 2 TDs, no interceptions. And the Steelers are firmly in first place in the AFC North. So talk about the Steelers before we preview Steelers and the Eagles.
As we've talked about before, I would really believe Russell Wilson is comeback player of the year. Without Russell Wilson, they're not at the record they're at right now. Justin Fields was serviceable when he was in there, but the way that Russell Wilson, not as much this past week, although he came in with a couple touchdowns on the back end of the game, but he's just been lighting it up since he's been the starter there. And you got to give Mike Tomlin once again credit. I think Pittsburgh is the dangerous wild card team in the AFC.
Yeah, and they did not have Pickens this week. He was out with a hamstring. He was inactive. So you saw Williams get involved and Freiermuth, their tight end, and Najee Harrison, another pretty good game for them, and Warren, their other back. And defensively, that's what I really want to see next week, the Pittsburgh defense against the Eagles. You had Benton, a defensive lineman, had an INT. Pierre, one of their DBs, had one as well. Wilson, now 6-1 as a starter, as you were saying. He's done a great job. It's interesting. Angels listening, and our one buddy Richie, who I'm always on with, Rich Q, on his show, listen to it during the week. He killed Russell Wilson. He said he's done, he's washed, all that stuff. So I told him he needs to write a personal apology letter to him because he's looking pretty strong, and it's going to be interesting. Does Pittsburgh give him the contract going forward? So Pittsburgh is at Philadelphia, and then the poor Browns. KC is at Cleveland. So, but that'll probably be another field goal type of game, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're looking at in terms of those two teams. We're here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football. This game, Seattle 8-5 now over Arizona. Nate's pick of Kyler Murray as an MVP candidate and all this stuff did not look too good. He's my fantasy quarterback, and he had 2 interceptions again. He was slow starting in this game. They just were behind the whole time. And Seattle, you got to tip their cap to them. 4 straight wins for them since they're bye. Geno Smith is very efficient. You talk about a guy who's had a career comeback, 24 of 30, 233, had a touchdown, no interceptions. But the thing is, Seattle ran a ball for 176 in this game. And I picked up Zach Charbonnet off the wire. He led me into the playoffs for fantasy. 22 rushes, 134, 2 TDs in this game. And then he also did real well catching the football as well. So talk about this game for a little bit and where Seattle and Arizona go from here.
I think Seattle's starting to separate themselves with them and the Rams now. I think you're going to see San Fran and Arizona start to fall to the wayside, even though San Fran had that little layup win against Chicago. Geno Smith has been playing well. I personally have taken shots at Geno Smith and Seattle over the course of the year, but they've won me over a little bit. I mean, they don't play the most exciting, best-looking football, to watch, but they win games, and that's all that matters, especially in a division like that one right there. So I think Seattle and the Rams are going to separate themselves from the other two.
And it's interesting because, Seattle, their defense is sneaky good. We talked about Leonard Williams last week. Kobe Bryant had another pick for them. And defensively, McDonald has really fixed that defense coming over from Michigan and the Ravens. And that's their calling guard. So they were up 24-10 in this one at certain points. And Jackson Smith and Jigma, you can't talk about fantasy football impact without talking about him. 5 receptions, 82. 1 TD. He really has become their lead receiver instead of Metcalf, and he always seems to be open. So Seahawks, they benefit from Geno. As you said, he's 5-0 versus Kyler Murray. So, they're moving on in good fashion for them. And Green Bay's going to be at Seattle. So that's a prove-it type of game. We're going to see how that goes. Charbonnet may end up playing again because Walker has a calf injury, and he did not practice again today, and they're not too sure about him. New England's at Arizona. So that if they can't beat New England and get back to 500, they're not worth talking about. But the Cardinals definitely have some work to do. I watched a lot of this game, and Harrison Jr. is not getting the ball. He only had 4 receptions for 49 yards. McBride's having a nice season, but just too inconsistent, and Seattle's moving in the opposite direction. The next game we'll hit on, you just kind of talked about a little bit. San Francisco's now 6-7. They beat the struggling Chicago Bears, who have now lost 7 straight, 38-13. And with this game, no, I just wanted to one question: did they save their season? Are they going to get back in the mix? I know you kind of talked about it just a little bit earlier, but what are we thinking in terms of Niners?
I mean, they're still San Francisco. You look at them that way, but I think with the injuries that they've had, I don't think everyone on that team is on the same page together. I know Debo's can't be that happy right now. That's for sure. He's not hanging the numbers he used to hang, and you have Williams going through his family stuff and everything else. And I just think there's some finger pointing starting to go on that team, and you got to think about contracts coming up. Who's going to get paid? Who's not going to get paid? And I remember saying before the season started, I thought this was the last year they had for that window closed. And I think the window is already closing on them.
Yeah, and this could be a get-right game. We'll see. They got Hufanga back, their safety. They sacked Caleb Williams 7 times. In terms of the Bears, Brown came in, and he's tried to help this offense. They were struggling for good portions of it. And talk about USC quarterbacks, Caleb Williams getting a baptism by fire in the National Football League. He did have 2 TDs, but he had a bad fumble in this one. And it's just going to get worse for them, and we'll see how it goes. Gross Montos for the Niners. He had 4 tackles, 3 sacks in this game. He was all over the place in Chicago. They got some empty calorie points at the end. They were down 24-0 at one point. So Chicago is at Minnesota. That's on Monday night. Now, this is an interesting one. The Rams are at the Niners. This is Thursday night, so it's a short week for them. And they're going to need to get a good effort again from Kittle, who was all over the place, 6 reception, 151. But I kind of lean it towards you in terms of injuries, defections, and just a lot of infighting. They're going to struggle to finish, 9-8. They would have to win 3 of their last 4 games, and I just don't see that for the Niners. And they're probably going to finish out of the race, and everybody would say, "Oh, what if?" But they have a lot of decisions to go there. The next game we'll hit on now. This was the scoring match of the weekend, Kevin. This was a fun game to watch. I watched a lot of it. I don't know if you were able to. The Los Angeles Rams, they're now 7-6. They're over the Buffalo Bills, who are 10-3, 44-42. I mean, a lot of points scored in this one. Stafford showed at 35 that he still can sling it, 320 yards, 2 TDs. And my guy, another guy I had, because you'll love this. I scored 179 points this week in fantasy. I had Puka Nacua, 12 catches, 162, 1 TD. He had a rushing touchdown. I mean, he was incredible in this game. On the other side of it, Josh Allen set a fantasy football record. He scored over 51 points. It was like 51 and some change in this one. 3 TDs passing, 3 TDs rushing. First quarterback to do that in the NFL since Otto Graham in 1954. So just talk a little bit about this game, and where these teams go from here.
That was one of those games about 2-3 minutes ago in the first quarter. It's like, why didn't I bet the over? Why didn't I bet the over? It's like it was so obvious. Everything's always obvious after you see it, but you knew it was going to be a track meet at that point. It's like everyone's going up and down the field, and it's a great game to watch. Anytime you see a game like that, it's just plenty of offense. It's good eye candy to keep everything moving. I think the Rams they're just going to keep moving forward as long as they can stay healthy. That's the big thing with them. You have an older quarterback. You have guys coming off injuries. Your big receivers, Kupp, Nacua, Kyron Williams can stay healthy. The Rams, they're a formidable team. They can hang some points. That's the thing. You're going to have to shut down that offense to beat them. So, Buffalo, on the other hand, it's a little, stumble in the road right there. Buffalo will right itself. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, it's going to be fun because, and we'll preview this in a few minutes, Buffalo is at Detroit. So this could be a mini Super Bowl preview. We kind of hit on it with Bob a little bit. Both these teams, they've been playing at a high level all season. I'm really looking forward to that game next week. I think it's the afternoon feature game. Buffalo did have a 7-game winning streak snapped, but they were right in the mix in this one. And most points scored by Matthew Stafford when he started the game. The Rams, as I said, they're at San Francisco on Thursday night. If they can win that one, they're going to get some breathing room, and then they could start thinking about chasing Seattle coming up. So good win for them. in terms of the other games before we get to Week 15, you had Miami over the Jets. We can finally stick a fork in the Jets. They're mathematically eliminated. Does Aaron Rodgers retire? And you know, he threw for 300 yards for the first time since 2021. But what do you think about Aaron Rodgers going into next season?
It's almost you picture yourself as his PR guy. It's like, how do I spin this so he doesn't leave retire on a sour note? I don't think you can. I really don't think the Jets bring him back. I don't know what team would actually be like, let's sign Aaron Rodgers for this year. To put yourself through the Aaron Rodgers experience with the media and his smug attitude to begin with, I don't think a team, unless you were just trying to fill seats, you would bring Aaron Rodgers over.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think he needs to kind of step away. He turned 41 a couple weeks ago, and you can see he's just not on the same page with a lot of his younger teammates, and it's just not working. And then you start wondering about, okay, what team is really going to invest in a 41-year-old quarterback? And yes, it worked for Tom Brady with the Bucks, but that's a total aberration. I don't see that happening with him. He's not moving around the pocket the way he needs to be. His arm strength's not where it was, and he's starting to look like Johnny Unitas playing for the Chargers, and Joe Namath playing for the Rams. It's done. It's done. So, but as you said, very prideful guy, and me. So we'll see what he does, and then imagine if like Tennessee says, okay, we'll go for him. Somebody like that.
Mm-hmm.
Last game we'll hit on from Week 14 before we jump over. We talked about a little bit, Bob. Right, doinked it in. The Chiefs beat the Chargers on Sunday Night Football 19-17. At first, it started slow, was 13-0 at the half, and then the Chargers really picked it up. And Herbert really showed me something in terms of he was a gutty performance by them. But man, the Chiefs just keep doing it. They find a way every time. It's almost getting boring. You know what I mean? It's almost like Michael Jordan his last season versus the Jazz. You're like, all right, he's going to win. It's almost fatigue.
Yep.
What are you thinking in terms of the Chiefs?
I'm in quite the conundrum here. I dislike the Kansas City Chiefs now more and more each week. That being said, I like Andy Reid. I like Patrick Mahomes. Travis Kelce doesn't even bother me that much, except when Taylor Swift is actually at the game. So it's one of the things. I don't dislike the actual players. I dislike the fact that they keep winning. And I don't know if it's sour grapes, because from everyone, when your team doesn't win and you see this one team just luckily keep winning over and over again, I mean, you become a little envious of them. So I'm just dealing with my sour grapes over here, but I'm ready for Kansas City to either I want to witness history again and see the three-peat, or I want them to get knocked out in the first round. One or the other. Just don't drag it out for me.
Yeah, and I keep saying, when I was emailing my one buddy, they're using all their pixie dust, all the angels in the outfield. Everything's bouncing away. Think about the Denver game. They blocked the kick to win, and the false start snap against the Raiders, and now the doink to beat the poor Chargers. But Kansas City 10-0 this season in one-score games. They clinch the AFC West again for the 9th straight season. They're now chasing the Patriots, who did it, I believe, 11 times. But it's just incredible, this run around. And even if you're not a fan of the Chiefs, you got to say, okay, this is some serious greatness between Andy Reid, Mahomes. What a great job they're doing. So they're at Cleveland this week. Tampa Bay is at the Chargers. All right, before we preview Week 15 here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network, we got to give out. All right, we'll go with Game Ball winner first. A lot of choices out there. I wonder who Kevin went with first. I'll let Kevin go first.
I had to give it to Sam Darnold for kicking me out of the fantasy playoffs, hanging 5 touchdowns, and going to USC. I deserved all that, and I will humbly write him a letter. How about that? Apologizing for trashing him for so long. So it's got to be Sam Darnold for me. He had a great game.
Yeah, and there were a lot of choices. So you had Puka Nacua, I talked about, Josh Allen. Garindo really stepped up for the Niners. He played very good in that win for them. Zach Bourne again for the Eagles. I mean, 11 tackles, a sack. He's everywhere from them. He should make All-Pro. But I did go. It was definitely fantasy influence. I went with Zach Charbonnet, 22 rushes, 134, 2 TDs, including a 51-yard run. He also had 2 targets for 59 yards. He was everywhere for the Seattle Seahawks. Big win for them over the Cardinals. So I went with Zach Charbonnet. Lackey, I watched this game and I was like, not that I'm an Eagles hater. People say I am sometimes. Xavier Legette, I'm giving you the Lackey he's from the Carolina Panthers. He only caught 2 of 8 targets for 39 yards against the Eagles. He had that touchdown catch. There would have been 45 seconds left. He caught it. They went to replay, and then it showed he couldn't pull in his breadbasket as he rolled. So I'm giving it to Legette. He had a lot of drops in this very close loss to the Philadelphia Eagles.
I'm going to have to go. I'm going to give a two-way tie for this one, and it goes to two quarterbacks that are basically strangling their own team right now with their turnovers and their poor play. One is now a 2-week in a row winner of a Lackey Ball. Kirk Cousins took the big bag to go to Atlanta and throwing nothing but interceptions. The other one I have tied with him, Nate's boy, Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is doing everything in his power to drag down that Arizona Cardinals franchise, making poor decisions, turning the ball over. Those two combined are 1A and 1B, so they can share it.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're like, gee, thanks. It's funny because I'll never forget one time I gave a Lackey when I was writing. A player's mom sent me an email. She said, "How can you give my son this? He's a professional. You should show more compassion." All right, easy, everybody. We're just having fun with that. And when even if it's your kid, when they screw up, in a game, they get the Lackey. So I give it to Legette, but yeah, Cousins definitely and Murray as well definitely deserve it. And then I got, I'll call out AJ Brown. He's got to be more of a team player. That's something we're gonna have to watch in the Eagles locker room. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. Bob Groats did a great job when he was on earlier in the show. Now we're going to transition over to Week 15 around the National Football League. We'll preview some of the bigger games. There are okay matchups coming up. I'm just glad all the buys are over. Everybody's played 13 games. They had their bye. Now we don't have to worry about who's not playing and all that fun stuff. All right, Thursday night. The Rams are at the San Francisco 49ers. Been back and forth on this one. The Niners are kind of beat up in this one. Brock Purdy's played a little bit better, but I just think the Rams have finally started hitting on something. I think they're going to hit Nakua and Cup on all those crossing patterns. I think the Rams win this one, but it may be close.
I think San Francisco, this is their last gasp right here. I think it's a close game. I think it comes down late in the fourth quarter, but I think the Rams find a way to steal that one, and that'll be the end of San Francisco. And that's when you're going to really start seeing what's been going on behind the scenes, possibly in San Francisco.
Yep, yeah, that's going to be a fun one. It's a short week, so any player that's banged up, they're probably not going to play in that one, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Miami Dolphins 6-7 at the Houston Texans. Two teams you really can't kind of figure them out. At this point, the Dolphins are trying to save their season. Waddle had a better game. Tua, I think, since he's come back, has been pretty efficient with the football and their defense with Holland and the rest of those guys. They're doing a good job. But, Houston's coming off a bye. They're due to break out, I would think. They started the season so well. I just think, okay, they're going to break out and they're going to win this game. But this is going to be interesting. Indoors. So what are you thinking? Dolphins at Texans.
I think it's going to come down to pace of play right there. Whose running game can get off more? If Mixon can get going, a chain can get going, it depends on which one. Then you set up the pass with that. I think we've seen with Houston now, C.J. Stroud, I think the defenses have figured him out a little more. The coordinators have, and they've put him in situations necessarily that aren't in his strong suits right there. That's a close game. That's one where Houston needs that game. They need to start wrapping up that division because Indianapolis is not that far behind them. And Miami, you need to keep pace and trying to get into the playoffs right there. That might be one of the better games of the weekend.
Yeah. And then this next one's going to be fun. We'll touch on it real quick. The the Commanders coming off a bye, you wonder which Jaden Daniels is going to show up. And you talked about defenses kind of figuring people out at certain points in the season. We'll see if the Saints, who kind of look good against the Giants, if they're able to keep their momentum rolling. I do think, though, that the Commanders are going to try to secure that playoff spot, and they'll find a way to win this one. But it may be close another game. The only thing is Derek Carr, he's a little banged up. I'm not sure he's going to play in this game.
I like the Commanders in it coming off a bye. I think they'll be ready to go for that one. New Orleans, they look like a team they're playing out the string. When you put them against someone like the Giants, it's like, oh, they're into it a little more. They're a team, if they start falling behind, they'll roll over. So if Washington can jump out quick on them, I think that'll be it for that game.
Yeah. And then the big one, this game I've been talking about with Nate over and over again. Everybody knows he's a Bills fan, so that this could be a Super Bowl preview. You got Buffalo, who's 10-3. We talked about that close loss and that high-scoring game to the Rams this week. They're at the Detroit Lions, 12-1. The Lions have been living on the edge as well. Much like the Chiefs, they're squeaking these games out. I think the Bills are really kind of showing a resiliency lately. They found a running game. I know Cook didn't have a lot of touches yesterday, but with Josh Allen, Cook, and their defense kind of coming together with Matt Milano and the guys, I think they're going to win this game. And you're probably going to see Jared Goff in this game. So I think the Bills go on the road and beat Detroit.
I agree with you 100%, to be honest. I think there might have been a factor, the Bills looking ahead at the calendar, possibly, that they were playing Detroit the following week. 2 road games in a row right there. I'm not saying they took the Rams lightly, but there is an eye, at Detroit the next week after that. I think that this game's going to come down to Dan Campbell making a poor decision, and it's going to cost the Detroit Lions the game in the end.
And everybody's going to be debating, and I definitely kind of agree with you there. I think he's just. And I'm going to start coining this nickname for him, Dangerous Dan Campbell, because he is dangerous. We used to have Riverboat Ron, but he is dangerous in terms of – think about last year, NFC Championship game. His team could have won over the Niners, but he kind of – he's not playing the odds correctly. He's got a good kicker. Why not lean on your defense? But sometimes he's just like, hell be damned, I'm going for it on 4th down. So we'll see about that one. The Pittsburgh Steelers, 10-3. They're at the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Eagles, they were possibly looking ahead to this game, but I think, the Steelers' defense, the Eagles allowed the Carolina to sack them 4 times this week. And I think the Steelers' defense with T.J. Watt, Highsmith, and all those guys, they're going to get pressure on Jalen Hurts, and they're going to force Saquon to kind of be the second wheel in this game. And I don't think that's going to help out the Eagles. So I'm going to go for the Steelers in a close win over the Philadelphia Eagles.
I, as well, am going to take the Pittsburgh Steelers in this one. The Eagles have run off 9 in a row. All right, in this day and age, you rarely see somebody roll off 10 in a row. So it's just a matter of time when that L is going to come. I think the more detrimental thing is going to be the Eagles lose this game and the finger pointing gets a little more intense. And then A.J. Brown, and I know Brandon Graham came out today and said some things. And it's just going to be one of those things. If this team turns on itself like it did last year, Philadelphia is just going to be a mess. So the Eagles need to pull this W out just so it keeps everyone a little more quiet. They lose this game, watch out on the floodgates.
Yeah, and it's an interesting game if they lose because depending on what Detroit does, that would put some space between the two teams. And then you're talking about the NFC Championship game going through Detroit. And everybody knows Minnesota, Detroit, these are dome teams. And why not get them Lincoln Financial Field? But, yeah, that's going to be an interesting game. But the Eagles got to match the Steelers' physicality. I expect both teams to run the football and play defense. Another great week here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I appreciate Bob Groats jumping on. Delco Times, former writer for many years. He had some great insight on the Philadelphia Eagles and teams that he covered over 43 years. Thanks again to Kevin for jumping on. Great insights, and we will definitely look at upcoming week. Angel did a great job behind the glass. Appreciate everybody joining, and we will look at Week 15 and Week 16 next week on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Thanks for joining.